Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. You guys might have been wondering what I've been up to for the last month. Did he give up? Did the HOA vote him out of the neighborhood? Did that car finally fall on his head like we all thought it would? Well, no to all of the above. 1, I'm never quitting. 2, I don't think my neighbors mind me that much because believe it or not, I try very hard not to be a pain in the butt. And 3, no, the car didn't fall on me. At least yet. Thanks, Danny. But that's really all I can say. I've been refusing to put out an episode, even though I've been working very hard because I haven't had a win in a while. I'm trying to get this frame down to clean bare metal, and I so badly wanted to have an episode where at the end of it I could say, yes, I found the best way to do this, and if you're working on your car too, you should definitely do it this way. But it turns out life doesn't always work that way, and I'm gonna be brutally honest here, I got nothing like that this time around. All I got are dozens of experiments that failed. But it's been long enough since I've put out an episode, so here we go. 2 full episodes of failures. There have been so many that it's worth 2 episodes. I might as well just share what I've been up to. So I'm starting on the driver's side front quarter because it seems easy enough with broad surfaces. I mean, how hard could this be? So I grab the angle grinder and the wire wheel attachment and get to work. And the wire wheel does a decent job of cleaning up the rust around the door hinges, but it's still not clean enough. As I've mentioned in the last episode, wire wheels aren't great for stripping paint and primer, so I'm switching to the Easy Strip disc. It's honestly my favorite mechanical way to get down to the bare metal because it's quick, it's forgiving, and it's much safer than a wire wheel, which can throw broken wires at your face at very high speed. So it makes pretty quick work of the rust, and I can move on towards the front of the car. So far it's pretty easy. I'm finishing up the easy part, I guess, and I'm starting to move into the crevices. And obviously the angle grinder is too big to get to all of the nook and crannies, but I'm trying to at least get all of the large flat surfaces. Also, I should mention that my arms are already getting tired at this point. This Milwaukee angle grinder with a 9 amp hour battery is really a pleasure to use for a short period of time, but try holding it for more than 10 minutes and you'll start to feel it in your shoulders. Especially if you're trying to hold it upside down. Do you guys remember this roll-lock disc? I believe it's made by 3M, and I used it a while ago to clean the engine block and the cylinder head gasket surface, and it worked extremely well then, so I decided to give it a go here. I need something smaller and lighter than the angle grinder to get into the edges and crevices, and it worked decently here. I'm using the white roll-lock disc, which is meant for aluminum and is the softest of the discs because I know the sheet metal is thin and I don't want it to eat into the surface. Again, it works okay, but the disc is spinning so fast and the rotary tool kind of gets flung almost uncontrollably whenever the disc hits something laterally. So it's really not all that useful. And it's also terrible against undercoating, and the disc gets eaten away really quickly, which is a bad thing because these are not cheap. Maybe the yellow or green roll-lock disc will work better. I'll try those later. So I'm back on the angle grinder, but here's what I'm realizing at this point. 1, my right shoulder is killing me. Call me a pansy if you want, but try to hold this thing tight at various angles. It's not a joke. It'd be easier if I had a rotisserie, but I don't have one, and trying to work for more than 10 minutes at a time is really frustrating, let alone trying to hold it upside down for 10 minutes. 2, the undercoating is proving to be really stubborn. Something I didn't realize with the Easy Strip disc is that if you try to remove a lot of undercoating with it, the rubbery stuff melts and embeds itself into the spongy disc, and it really slows down the progress to the point where it's not really doing much of anything other than to heat up the surface. So even with a wire wheel, if the undercoating is really thick, it actually takes a lot of effort to cut through. 3, this is making a hell of a mess. I didn't get a shot of the garage floor, but trust me when I say that the black dust went everywhere, and covered my floor. This is definitely the most unpleasant thing that I've done in the garage in a while. So speaking of making a gigantic mess, I decided to give media blasting another shot. No pun intended. After going at it with an angle grinder for an hour, my arms were just killing me, so I dragged the car outside to see if I could figure out this media blasting thing while I give my shoulders a break. And I did kind of figure it out. It turns out that for whatever reason, it works much better if I set the pressure up to something like 120 psi instead of the 90 max psi that the factory manual suggests. And that's what I get for reading the instructions for once. So it works okay, but I just absolutely hate doing this. This is just not a scalable solution for me, at least in the way that I have it set up. One, it makes an incredible mess with dust flying everywhere, and with the compressor kicking on, it's really loud. So for someone like me who lives in a townhouse, this isn't great. Also, this thing goes through media really fast. The blasting lasts for up to maybe 1 to 2 minutes with the hopper full of media, and I don't have a media collection system set up, so this is a gigantic pain in the neck. So every time I do this, every time I blast, I have to spend 30 minutes sweeping and cleaning my driveway. But all of this would be okay if it worked really well, but I just kept thinking there's gotta be a better way. I haven't given up on trying to make media blasting work because I know it's a legitimate solution. And when I figure it out, I'll make an episode that goes really more in depth. Maybe I'll try to make a blast booth in the garage and actually buy something a little bit more expensive and legit than this $15 toy from Harbor Freight. And by the way, for those of you guys blaming the compressor, I'm actually using a 30-gallon 200 psi compressor, which isn't a monster, but it should be big enough to run this thing for a little while at least. So after accomplishing nothing but make a giant mess, I decided to call it a day and roll this thing back into the garage. Alright, it's a new day, and although I didn't accomplish much previously, I'm freshly motivated. I think to myself, how do you eat an elephant? Apparently one bite at a time. So I take this one small corner, and at this point I'm kind of giving up on the idea that I can completely clean every nook and cranny down to clean, shiny metal. After all, I've seen plenty of restoration projects and how-to videos in which all someone did was take a metal brush, get rid of the flaky paint and crusty rust, paint over it, and call it done. And maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I should stop obsessing and get to a point where I can call it good enough and just paint over it. I'll try it and see how it turns out. After using the angle grinder with the easy strip disc to at least get to the large surfaces, I grabbed the Dremel tool with a tiny wire brush attachment and try to clean up all the nooks and crannies. And if I told you that I spent an hour doing this, you would probably think I was crazy. And yet, I did do just that. The thing that drove me a bit insane was that the wire brush wasn't strong enough to make this really easy or fast, but it was strong enough that with enough time and effort, it was getting down to the bare metal. 1/10 of a square inch at a time. So me being the obsessive person that I am, it was kind of hard to stop. So after this insanity, I am prepping for paint. Of course, it doesn't make sense to paint this section yet in the grand scheme of things, but I do really want to see how this section turns out after it's been freshly painted over. Maybe it'll look great, and I can just take this angle grinder and Dremel combo to rest of the car. And other than having to buy some spare Dremel batteries, if this is how I need to do it, it certainly beats having to clean buckets of media in my driveway. So I'm using Eastwood's Afterblast paint prep solution here to clean the surface. If you want to know all the products that I'm using, I'll eventually make a video detailing all the tools and products that I found to be really helpful and useful in doing this. But I'm not ready for that video. I'm still learning about all of this stuff, but be on the lookout for that eventually. So what's cool about this Afterblast chemical is that it turns the bare metal into this gray matte textured surface, and I don't know exactly what it's doing, but apparently it's coating it with zinc to prevent flash rusting, and it's also cleaning the surface of oils and dust so that the paint has an optimal surface to stick to. It sounds, pretty good to me. After blowing this area dry completely, I'm using another one of Eastwood's products, the Rust Encapsulator. And I keep forgetting what the difference is between their Rust Encapsulator and the Rust Converter is, but I think the dummy version is that the Rust Converter needs rust to work, while Rust Encapsulator needs mostly a clean metal surface. So I guess I'm going to use the encapsulator here. So I give it one light coat, let it dry for a couple of minutes, and hit it with 2 more heavier coats. So here's how this turned out, and it's not completely dry yet, but I can already tell that I don't like this. This is what my version of good enough looks like, and it looks okay from afar, but on closer inspection, you can tell that the surface wasn't completely clean, even after an hour of working with a Dremel. And I'm not talking about the pitted surface due to the rusted sheet metal either. There's not much I can do about that. But I'm talking about the flakes of old paint that the angle grinder wasn't able to reach, and the Dremel wasn't powerful enough to remove. And although I can argue that if the Dremel didn't take the old paint off, it's not likely to fall off anytime soon on its own, but I don't like it. And I don't even know really why I'm being so obsessive. Once the headlight bucket goes on, this isn't even a surface that anyone will be able to see. But I'll know. I'll always know, and this isn't good enough. Okay, so it's yet another day. Not much progress so far, but I did recall that someone in the comment section in a previous video mentioned something about paint strippers. It's an option that I disregarded at the time because it sounded very messy and unnecessary, but it's sounding pretty good right about now. It really can't be any more messy than the methods that I've tried so far. So I went out and got this aircraft paint stripper, and no, it's not for airplanes. I think that's just the brand name. I'm hoping that this works well, and in theory, this actually has some promise, since this should get into all of the nooks and crannies that's driving me crazy, and maybe this is a way around having to grind for hours until my arms fall off. Hopefully this will just melt the paint off. Anyway, it's worth a shot. So I take a glass cup that I bought from a dollar store, and a brush that I also bought from a dollar store, and I lay on a thick coat of this stuff on the undercoating just to see how well it works. Okay, so before anyone says anything, I do recommend wearing a respirator. I got a nice breeze going through the garage right now, and I'm testing just a small section, so I'm not wearing one. But this stuff does smell pretty bad, and I'm sure it's not good for you. And after waiting for about 30 minutes, like the directions said, I was hoping that the undercoating would just kind of flake off. Well, it didn't. It did make the outer layer of the undercoating soft, but it didn't really cut into the bare metal at all. I scraped and I scraped, but it was clear that I needed to repeat this process about 3 or 4 times to get to the bare metal. And maybe it works better on just paint, and it's not really made for undercoating. Well, in any case, this is yet another experiment that didn't yield very good results, so I'm moving on to another method. So I'm now trying the heat gun method, and maybe I can just melt this thing off. I've heard of guys using either a heat gun to soften this stuff up and to scrape it off, or use dry ice to harden it so that it'll flake off. Well, I don't have dry ice, and I don't even know how I would use it to work in this area, so I'll try the heat gun. By the way, if at this point you're wondering, why are you trying so hard to avoid the angle grinder? Didn't you just make a video about using a wire wheel or the air scraper or the scaler or like a dozen other methods to do just that? Well, here's the thing. Those methods all work for areas that are easy to get to. None of those really are satisfactory for areas like here, here, or here, or here, where none of those tools reach. And I was hoping that the media blasting would solve my problems for those nooks and crannies, but like I've said before, that didn't really pan out the way that I wanted it to. Um, and also, I'm a scientist at heart, so I'm actually just kind of experimenting with different methods, I guess. And this heat gun thing kind of works, and it kind of doesn't. It does definitely soften up the undercoating, but this is hardly easy work. The paint stripper actually works better than this with less manual labor, and I don't have to sit here for hours pointing this heat gun at the car in warm weather. Another failed experiment then. I'm pretty dejected at this point. I don't even know how to continue. I guess I'll just pick up the angle grinder again and try to make a bit more progress. By the way, I can totally see why so many people give up project cars at precisely this point. This assembly is easy and even fun. It's easy to make a lot of visible progress in a few short weeks because any monkey can take stuff apart. But this is a whole different ball game. This is messy, this is smelly, shoulder aching, slow, and completely infuriating, but it's what needs to be done. At least I have a ton of time to think about life and all of the terrible choices I've made. Like the choice to take apart a perfectly running car to prove something to somebody. I don't even remember at this point. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that episode for what it's worth, and there's another one that will be coming out fairly quickly. It's just a continuation of my failures, let's just call it that. Yeah, this part's not fun. I gotta admit, I'm not enjoying this part at all. The only thing that keeps me going is the fact that I'm learning new things and just envisioning what this car will eventually be, which seems very, very far away now. But I'm gonna keep going. I hope you guys stay tuned. And sorry, there wasn't much helpful content in this one. So let's go through the GoFundMe shoutouts as usual. So there have been a few. Two of them were anonymous, but one of them was from Sky Watson for $20. Awesome, thank you. That's very generous. And I see that you have a 1978, mine's a 77. I see that you have a 1978 280Z that's been in your family since it was new. That's awesome. I don't often hear about 280Zs that have been in the family forever. I hear a lot of 240Zs that people kept for a very long time, but 280Zs to have kept that car for so long without selling it or junking it is, I think, it's the first time I've heard that. Cool. So thank you very much. As usual, please subscribe if you like the content. I feel a little guilty saying that after this episode, but hopefully, it'll get better. Stay tuned, and I'll see you later.